From Vermont Public, this is The Frequency. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. It's Thursday, March 27th, and here are today's headlines. More than 30 young Vermonters gathered at the State House last week to urge lawmakers to bolster state-level protections for LGBTQ youth. Alex Yom Hallberg, a youth organizer at Outright Vermont, says executive orders signed by President Trump have created a terrifying new climate for queer and transgender children. And he says national policies demand a concrete response from state lawmakers.
We're calling for these solutions because the action we've seen lawmakers take in the past has not been enough to protect us. We are here telling you what needs to be done to keep our communities safe.
Young advocates are calling on lawmakers to increase funding for the Vermont Human Rights Commission, which enforces anti-discrimination laws. They also want the legislature to expand the scope of the Harassment, Hazing, and Bullying Prevention Advisory Council. Vermont regulators are weighing a statewide ban on commercial crappie fishing. The proposal comes after more than 200 people signed a petition calling to ban all commercial fishing here. Most commercial angling in Vermont happens during the winter on Lake Champlain with hooks and lures. Residents have long used it as supplemental income. But fish buyers in the state say shorter ice seasons and aging demographics are making the tradition dwindle. Scott Mobbs owns a shop that buys panfish like perch and sunfish from anglers on St. Albans Bay.
Last year, I bought fish for 6 weeks in the winter, where we used to buy for 4 months. So, kind of hurts business.
Vermont is expected to see less ice in the future because of human-caused climate change. Mobbs opposes the proposed rule change for crappie fishing and says even a slight cut in product coming in could put fish buyers like him out of business. Vermont Fish and Wildlife is holding public hearings about the proposal today in Rutland and March 31st online. The deadline for public comment is April 7th. A journalism professor at Norwich University and advisor to the school's student newspaper filed a lawsuit Monday, alleging administrators pressured student journalists to suppress stories that reflected poorly on the university. That's according to VT Digger. The lawsuit details how administrators allegedly sought to suppress the Guidon's news outlet reporting last year before suspending the online publication entirely, then allowing it to resume publishing with new oversight measures. In his lawsuit, Shane Graber alleges the university defamed him, violated his contract, and retaliated against him. A university spokesperson said the lawsuit is without merit. Vermont's Attorney General is encouraging customers of the genetic analysis company 23andMe to take steps to protect their data. Thousands of Vermonters have submitted DNA samples to the service to learn more about their medical history and family lineage. Attorney General Charity Clark is concerned about what will happen to those genetic samples because the company has filed for bankruptcy.
I really believe that our data belongs to us and we should control our data. So I am concerned that in a bankruptcy proceeding, that data could be considered an asset and be sold to who knows who.
The 23andMe website has instructions to permanently delete your DNA information. Coming up, booing the American national anthem at hockey games, canceling trips to vacation destinations in the States, rally cries of elbows up from politicians and celebrities. These are just some of the reactions Canadians have had to President Donald Trump's policies and recent statements about our longtime ally. We'll also hear how the fallout has affected relations directly between Vermont and neighboring Quebec after this.
Thanks for listening to The Frequency, where support comes from VITA, supporting business growth and innovation in the Green Mountain State. From agriculture to manufacturing, energy to food production, find solutions that turn your business dreams into reality. Visit VEDA.org and see how VITA can help make it happen.
The historic friendship between Vermont and Quebec continues to come under strain from the rhetoric and actions of President Donald Trump. His administration has imposed some tariffs on Canadian goods and has threatened more. He's also openly talked about making Canada, quote, the 51st state. Canada has responded to this aggression by imposing tariffs on American products, and ordinary Canadians are canceling trips to Vermont and booing the American national anthem at sporting events. Vermont Public reporter Brittany Patterson wanted to know how Canadians are feeling about all of this. So she spent some time at a business roundtable in Newport and on the streets of Magog, and sat down with host Mary Angish to talk about it. Here's their conversation.
Brittany, you had a chance to hear from Quebec business leaders and some ordinary citizens, too. It sounds like the concerns here are growing well beyond tariffs and trade.
Yeah, Mary, I think that's right. To be clear, Canada and the US are closely tied economically. They're each other's largest trade partners. We're talking billions of dollars worth of goods and services cross the border every single day. So last week, Senator Peter Welch organized this roundtable in Newport, and it brought together business owners from both sides of the border to talk about this economic impact of the tariffs. But almost immediately, it was clear that while there were very real economic concerns, there's also a growing hurt and anger at what the U.S. is doing. Here's Marie-Claude Bibeau, a member of parliament who represents a district in Quebec that includes part of the border with Vermont.
What's going on in Canada is without precedent. The threat is over and above tariffs right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm even a bit emotional when I say that because it's a threat against our sovereignty. Mm-hmm. And if it was a joke the first 24 hours, it's not a joke anymore. Mm-hmm. We take it very seriously.
As the event wound down, I was also struck by her parting statement. It was kind of a plea in Bibeau's voice as she addressed Senator Welch. Let's listen.
Thank you for all the work you've done and that you continue to do. Yeah. I don't want to put too much pressure on you, but we need your stories. You know what?
It felt like an acknowledgement that Canada has very little leverage here. This is really in the hands of President Trump.
Brittany, you've done some prior reporting on Canadians boycotting the U.S., canceling plans. Is there any kind of precedent in recent history for anything like this with Canada?
One thing to keep in mind is that Canada and the U.S. have for decades been extremely strong allies. I spoke to Jeffrey Ayers. He's a political science professor at St. Michael's College and an expert on U.S.-Canada relations. And he told me there had been, quote, no greater ally than Canada to the U.S. since at least World War II. So we're talking decades here. And that's not to say that there haven't been clashes between the two nations, especially in recent decades when it comes to trade. But this feels different.
There's never been a president or an administration in U.S. history that's disparaged Canada in this way. And that treats an ally and a friend and someone with beyond economic relations, but with, deep cultural and normative, almost family relations. So I think that's what's so particularly shocking about it.
I know you spent some time in Magog, a community that sits right along the northern tip of Lake Memphremagog. So that obviously has some strong connections to Vermont.
I did, and perhaps unsurprisingly, not a lot of folks wanted to speak with an American reporter. But in the conversations that I did have, I heard a lot of different variations on astonishment. And largely because it feels like most Canadians, they don't understand what the end goal here is. I spoke with Michel Emel, who's lived in Magog for 3 years and Montreal before that, and I asked him what he makes of Trump's actions, including the tariffs.
Most of people that I'm talking, they think it's ridiculous for you, American, and also for us. We're victim of that. And for the rest, about Trump, I think it's one of the worst president of the planet, So that's my opinion.
I also spoke with Magog residents that said the longer this goes on, the more afraid they are becoming. One woman said she had American friends and even Americans on the street or at her workplace who would stop and apologize to her. She was laughing. It's kind of a twist on the stereotype that Canadians are always the ones apologizing. But I also heard things like, I never thought we'd live to see this. And I heard fear that we are on the path toward the possibility of war.
Oh my gosh, I need to stop you right there. So you spoke with Quebec residents who are legitimately worried that the U.S. could launch a military invasion of Canada?
I did. And I think this is a change from when I was speaking with Canadian residents even just a few weeks ago. I heard lots of comparisons that the current actions mirror those in the lead up to World War II. And a lot of folks cited President Trump's friendly posture toward Russia and Russian President Vladimir Putin as another piece of evidence. And they feel powerless. Multiple people told me that they never thought they would see the U.S. turn on Canada like this. And almost unanimously, folks I spoke with said they would not visit the U.S. while this continues.
Well, we know travel goes both ways on the border. Vermonters long accustomed to visiting Montreal and many other places in Quebec and also other places in Canada. Any sense of how that dynamic may be changing?
I ran into this group of 4 Americans who were visiting. They were doing a girls' trip in Magog, and they'd been here before, and they'd had a great time. And that included Julie Hoker, who came from New Hampshire, and she was worried about whether they would be welcome in Canada.
It's disappointing, and I'm appreciative of the Canadian population that they don't consider every citizen of the United States as a part of what's going on with our country. And I'm hopeful that it stays that way.
But, things are changing seemingly daily, and it's a little bit hard to know.
That was Vermont Public reporter Brittany Patterson speaking with host Mary Engish. And you can find more reporting on the impacts of Trump's tariff policies on our website, vermontpublic.org. Well, the vernal equinox may have technically ushered in spring about a week ago, but for baseball fans, today is the day we officially say goodbye to winter. And it's also why we're moving the weekly sports report up a day this week. Yes, it's opening day in Major League Baseball. The one time during the regular season when all 30 teams have a true equal shot at being the next World Series champ, no matter how dismal the previous campaign or pessimistic the predictions from the pundits. But questions abound. Is there any team capable of dethroning last year's champs, the Los Angeles Dodgers, who appear to be even more stacked with talent in 2025 than they were last year? The New York Yankees made it to the Fall Classic last season, but are they more vulnerable now, given injuries to star players like slugger Giancarlo Stanton and ace pitcher Garrett Cole? And have the Boston Red Sox done enough to improve their roster to get back to the playoffs for the first time since 2021? We'll start with the Dodgers, looking very much like Goliath to almost every other club's David, and it's hard to see how they can fall unless another team sticks to that biblical script. The best all-around player in the game, Shohei Ohtani, has had a full offseason to recover from the shoulder ailment that plagued him in last year's playoffs, and there's even the possibility he could return to double duty this season as one of the game's premier hitters and pitchers. If so, he'll be joined in the starting rotation by Roki Sasaki, the coveted free agent who is one of the best pitchers in Japan's professional league and is making his debut in the majors this season. Their lineup sees the return of 2 key sluggers, last year's World Series MVP Freddie Freeman and outfielder Teoscar Hernandez. And back on the pitching front, LA bolstered its bullpen by signing 2 of the best relievers available in Kirby Yates and closer Tanner Scott. It's not easy to win back-to-back titles, but if any team is poised to do so, it's the Dodgers. Teams from the senior circuit that could give them a run for the money, literally, in getting back to the series include the free-spending New York Mets, who shelled out a record $765 million contract for one player, former Yankees slugger Juan Soto. But will that be enough to hold back the Dodgers? One thing's for sure, Soto better stay healthy, because any significant injury he suffers will make it look like the Mets put all their eggs into one basket and then left it lying in the middle of the Queens Midtown Expressway. If you want a less conventional dark horse pick for the National League this year, the Atlanta Braves and Philadelphia Phillies are safe ones. Expect a strong year from the Chicago Cubs, who fell off the radar after missing the playoffs the last 4 years. The Cubs will be a lot better with former Houston Astros slugger Kyle Tucker in their lineup and more depth to their pitching, and with the NL Central not being a super tough division, the Cubs could be playoff bound. As for the American League, I'm actually bullish on the Red Sox. The front office finally addressed the team's most pressing needs, opening their wallets when necessary and making shrewd trades that landed coveted lefty Garrett Crochet from the Chicago White Sox and Walker Buehler from the Dodgers to shore up the starting rotation. They also signed veteran slugger and former Gold Glove third baseman Alex Bregman to bolster and balance out a lefty-leaning lineup. They'll be better on both offense and defense this season, especially with some hopefully ready for prime time and highly ranked rookie prospects knocking at the major league door. Christian Campbell is one of those and looks to have landed the second base job out of spring training, and we're almost certain at some point this season to see what infielder Marcelo Meyer and outfielder Roman Anthony can do. Of course, the Red Sox are always good for some melodrama, and this year it comes courtesy of disgruntled superstar Rafael Devers. He's an exceptional hitter, but plays less than stellar defense at third base, and he's made no secret of his displeasure after hearing that Bregman may be taking over the hot corner, leaving Devers to instead be a designated hitter while occasionally filling in at first base. Neither is a great option, especially if Devers is going to have a chip on his shoulder about it, and I would not be surprised if a blockbuster trade results at some point this year. If the Red Sox feel they have no choice, they should hold out for the best possible yield in return. Losing Devers' bat weakens the lineup significantly, and although it would be nearly impossible to match it, they would need to get a player back who can at least approach the kind of RBI production Devers provides to make a trade worthwhile. That whole situation could muddy the playoff path, but I'll go ahead and predict Boston will win the AL East this year, with the still very good Baltimore Orioles, a team with some of the deepest pitching in the division, nipping right at their heels. Am I foolish for dismissing the Yankees as a potential wild card or even playoff no-show? Probably, but they'll have a lot less pop in their lineup without Soto, and Cole's injury is not a great sign for their starting rotation. One thing's for sure, though, baseball is back. And for those of us whose favorite hockey teams are not going to be skating for Lord Stanley's Cup this year, it's not a moment too soon. Thanks for listening to The Frequency today. We had additional reporting from Peter Hirschfeld, Abigail Giles, Nathaniel Wilson, and Bob Kinzel. Our executive producer is Kevin Trevelyan, and our music is by Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. Talk to you tomorrow.
Each morning, it's a new opportunity, a chance to start fresh. Up First from NPR makes each morning an opportunity to learn and to understand. Choose to join the world every morning with Up First, a podcast that hands you everything going on across the globe and down the street, all in 15 minutes or less. Start your day informed and anew with Up First by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts.